So RFK Jr. has been censored, silenced, and left out in the cold. If that's what the Democrats are willing to do to one of their own, imagine what they do to you. Well, for many disgruntled, undecided, and unaffiliated Americans, RFK Jr. is their guy. And while he and his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, she's right here in front of me and I can't even say her name, has been purposefully ignored by the Democrat Party, they are still a force to be reckoned with, but there's still a lot of mystery and perhaps misunderstanding that surrounds their campaign. Now, RFK Jr. himself is an enigma to most people. His positions on maybe climate change and abortion put him in the far left box, but his sharp rebuke of COVID policy and First Amendment infringements have softened the hearts and minds of some freedom first conservatives, making his candidacy a real spoiler alert for both Trump and Joe Biden. And my next guest, his running mate, may be a secret weapon in that whole effort. Vice presidential candidate Nicole Shanahan is live with me now, and I have so many questions for you. First of all, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Tomi.
You know, it's difficult sometimes to get people that are more on the left to even have conversations with people that are more on the right.
Yeah.
So first I have to ask you, why do something like this with somebody like me?
Well, I think you're wonderful. I think how you've come out in front, you're a leader for so many young women. You express your opinions so articulately. They come from, I see where they come from. And I think that many of us in America are coming from that same place. We just want to be in a country with respect and dignity. And we've created a discourse in this country with these theme words that represent something initially very well intentioned, but get hooked into this two-party system that hooks those things and then pits us against each other. And that means we oftentimes are forgetting, why it is we felt passion in the first place. So these big topics like abortion and the Second Amendment, gun rights, we all know that behind abortion is women's rights and health and dignity for the family. We all want dignity for the family. Guns, we all want security. And how we get to that point is you and I sitting down together and figuring it out from a place of we agree that we want dignity in our families and we agree that we want agency and sovereignty for our health.
I can tell you what I really appreciate about not only your running mate, gets a lot of attention obviously for some of his positions, but you specifically, is that I do think that you represent what a lot of Americans feel, that they align on certain things that are to the left, certain things that are more to the right, a lot of things that are right in the middle. And a lot of people in America right now are attracted to your campaign because they feel like they are on that spectrum somewhere.
Yep.
And that either Joe Biden or Donald Trump, they feel as though they are on opposite sides of the spectrum, and then these people are in the middle and they want somewhere to go. And your campaign effort has given that to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about some of the more controversial parts of it that
Sure.
people need more of an understanding or an explanation of, because even you and RFK Jr. have disagreements on certain things, which I don't think for anybody should be a deal breaker. I mean, you're two different people. You don't have to align on everything. But, there's been a lot of discussion about the abortion topic. And your running mate, RFK Jr., has come out and kind of clarified some of his positions on abortion, because I think it startled a lot of people when they saw the headlines, oh, RFK Jr. believes in, abortion until the last minutes. And that was, controversy. Since clarified it. But you have your own kind of take on abortion and women's rights and reproductive health. And I want to kind of get into that from your perspective.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So, you have to remember where RFK is coming from. He's a medical freedom guy. He doesn't think there should be mandates. He takes a very, libertarian view towards health in general. So when he says, it should always be the woman's choice, he means it, right? Like, and that's the thing in the sense of, we don't want the federal government telling us what to do with our bodies. So that's where that stance comes from. He also believes in the sacredness of life, and he says every abortion is a tragedy. And my take coming into this is that, I've carried a baby. I I want more babies. And I know a lot of women who really want to grow their families right now. And I've spent my career really trying to figure out what's gone on in this country with maternal health. Why have our birth rates plummeted so much? And I understand there's, socioeconomic issues at play, but I've been working on the science for a really long time to try to understand what is going on. Why, when you do have a kid, there's a 1 in 2 chance, greater than a 1 in 2 chance that kid's going to end up with chronic disease. So my take on abortion is really through the lens of let's talk about maternal health. Let's really understand and analyze the issue. The greatest gift of becoming part of this campaign has been listening to the pro-lifers in this country and understanding what they're seeing in their communities. Here's a great example. Angela Stanton King is part of our campaign. She's a pro-lifer. And, she was really distraught by hearing some of these rumors that Bobby said he believed in full-term abortions. He's never said those words.
Right.
Never once. But that's how it got represented.
Mm-hmm.
Angela from our campaign sees this and she's devastated. And I spent some time with her in Houston at Houston's only maternity home for women who chose to keep their baby. But there's no government funding for maternity homes for women like her,
Mm-hmm.
but there's abortion clinics everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And many of these women, like Angela, she lived it herself. This is a lived experience. And this is why podcasts are so great, because people get to talk about their lived experience and not these political sound bites. And I have learned that what has happened with abortion in this country, because we push so hard for women's choice and because the federal government has dumped so much money into Planned Parenthood and abortion clinics, that something has gone wrong. We have missed the wires. And progressives don't understand this. Progressives also don't understand what's happened to our border. Mm. So there's this interpretation layer that this campaign is doing right now for both sides. We're helping people understand that this is not just about a woman's right to choose right now. This is about the unequal application of funds that are hurting communities, right? And once they see that these abortion clinics are really pushing women to choose abortion because of poverty, that's wrong. That is against the progressive ethos in every single way.
I'm glad that you said that. I think both sides bear some blame on this. When I say both sides, I mean Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, pro-life, pro-choice. I think that both sides bear some blame because as much as the religious right pro-life movement talks about life, sometimes they're not as ready to discuss what you're talking about, which is what a support is available for women who want to choose life, but they feel like they have no option. And of course, there are a lot of people on the pro-life side that dedicate their lives to resource centers, so I don't want to put them all in a box with that, but we could do better on the right, and the left could certainly do better in not celebrating abortion, which I think is abhorrent.
It is, exactly. That was so well said. What you just said embodies exactly the kind of conversation and the solutions that we can come together around. Everything you just said, I am full agreement with. And I think most Americans are. And so we get stuck, right? We're in this hammerlock because we're stuck between these two parties that are running on these platforms, saying these things about the other party, creating mass fear and hysteria. And we're a great nation. We have, every capability to have this kind of conversation. And I'm just, grateful that you're leading the way with this. I'm grateful to be a part of this campaign to show how that looks in political conversation. And, part of what the opportunity is here is every single day we open our mouths, we get to show both sides how this can be done.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that there's something really powerful as well with a third party candidate that isn't necessarily tied to either side, because you guys have more leeway to talk about the nuance of things and the gray area, which I think is important, which I think is why your campaign has gained so much steam. more so than really any other third party independent candidate has, at least in recent memory, for that reason. Something else that you talk about too that I think I want to talk to you about is your comments about IVF. Now, this has been a point that has been something that Governor Gavin Newsom has railed on. Republicans want to end IVF. It's a Republican issue. You have once called IVF the biggest lie told to women. So I want to get your take on that, but I also want to get it on the lens of what's happening in real time, which is this huge controversy right now about the Chiefs kicker, Harrison Butker, who delivered a commencement address. And he talked about IVF in some of the same ways that you talk about IVF, of it being a lie told to women. And I'm wondering what your take is on his comments, where you align on that, and kind of some of the nuance that maybe we haven't heard from you or from this perspective.
Yeah, thank you. So if you see where that sentence was taken from, it was in a real long form article published by the Financial Times of London. It's available. Hannah Kutchler wrote it, and she actually wrote it while she was pregnant. And I had tried to get this full form explanation across of what is actually going on with our scientific dollars as it relates to reproductive health. Very little money has gone into understanding how to preserve female reproductive function naturally. Almost no money has gone into that. And if you look at where IVF came from, it came from cancer research dollars. So there's this trend right now in these pretty invasive medical procedures that are considered groundbreaking to go through oncology to get approvals. And then once they're approved in oncology, oftentimes it gets fast-tracked for use in healthy people. And that IVF didn't come from the mission of fertility. If you actually think about what IVF does, it is an intervention for infertility. So then we got to ask the question, what's going on with infertility? And that's where I think that when IVF is sold as a fertility treatment, that's what makes that a lie.
Okay.
It is a infertility intervention. And what I want to focus on, and what I have always focused on, I'm the largest funder in the space. I put $100 million into answering this question. What is going on with infertility in this country?
It's worthwhile. So I'm 31. A lot of my friends are in their mid-30s, edging towards their 40s, and a lot of my friends have chosen the route of freezing their eggs because they're not with anybody. They want to be mothers, and I feel like that's almost become the norm. But with women in their mid-30s, as they immediately jump to freezing their eggs, that's not something that I personally am interested in. But I have a lot of friends that are, and they think of it as a security net, a safety net. They look at it as, boy, I better do this because if not, I'm never going to be a mom. What's your take on that? And do you think too many young women are going that route, maybe jumping the gun on it a little bit?
It is a big intervention. I mean, you know, and I know we've heard the stories of what our friends have gone through. I, many years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, got in a big argument with a man who owns most of the IVF clinics in the United States. And he was telling me that it's no big deal. IVF is like, you just, on your lunch break, it's like a coffee break. You just go and get the shots and get the extractions and pump your body through of hormones, and it's not a big deal at all. I will tell you, every woman I have spoken to who is close to me, who's gone through this, would disagree with that. It is a big, if you think about what it's doing,
right?
Your body is designed to ovulate one egg every month on a cycle oftentimes tied to the moon cycle. And what egg freezing promotes is, well, let's maximize the amount we can by injecting your body with 20x, 30x, 40x, like a massive percentage higher of chemicals that stimulate follicle development. So, it is this maximalist view of fertility. I can see why so many women are interested in this, because the fear of not being able to have a child in your lifetime because factors don't line up. That's a very, very real fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so to look at this opportunity as something that will preserve my options, I get it. I totally get it. I would never take that away from anybody. What I would like to provide is also alternative paths that allow women to have that same level of confidence about their fertility without having to go through such a large intervention. That's what I invest in. That's what I've been investing in. That's what I care about. And that's the advocacy that I think is missing right now, is how do we help a 26-year-old woman track her course of lifetime fertility so that she has confidence in 10 years she's going to be able to conceive a healthy baby.
That's important.
And why is it such a mystery that some women at 45 are having healthy babies and some women at 27 aren't? This is the disparity that we need to be looking at scientifically. And we won't get there if somebody who just kind of questions the ethics of IVF is getting hammered as like an anti-woman person.
So I want to, do you think that the criticism of Harrison Butker, do you think that that's unfair? I mean, today it's really the top story. There's a change.org petitions, 100,000 signatures. People really want him to be canceled. And as somebody who understands cancel culture, and RFK Jr. understands cancel culture and censorship, do you think that the criticism is unwarranted for someone who's just up there doing what you and I do every day, speaking his mind, sharing his feelings that might run contrary to the NFL or to other sports journalists out there? Do you think it's unfair what he's getting?
Yeah, I didn't watch the clip. I've got to catch up on that. But I think anyone who comes out and questions the ethics of private equity companies owning female fertility is valid in their concerns. Most of these are cash-only medical services, and they are not owned by hospitals. They are owned by private equity firms. Private equity firms that own like Sweet Greens, private equity firms that own amusement parks. And in their portfolio are IVF clinics, and they think about IVF as almost like a commodity. And that's,
IVF is becoming like Botox once was.
Yeah.
Right, where it's becoming like that's what you do when you turn 26.
Yeah. And I think that there's a big need for ethics. I think we need to think about ethics because this is the most sacred part of the human experience is creation of new life, and it behooves us to do it with the finest amount of respect, of understanding, of objective conversation. And we're not going to get that if it's also the fastest growing industry in the medical field. I mean, if you look at the amount of money that these IVF clinics are making, they're on a trajectory to be, a multi-trillion-dollar business over the next 20 years. And that is going into, corporate profits. So if we can, have an objective conversation about this without the involvement of these conflicts of interest, which are great because this is incredibly lucrative. If we can just have this conversation about ethics, bring in some real ethicists as well, bring in spiritual leaders, bring in scientists who aren't getting cuts from the companies to really look longitudinally about what this does to psychology, to the psyche. Like, these are the kinds of conversations we ought to be having. So if there's a man out there who wants to be a leader in this space and open that up for discourse, I think it should be welcome. We live in a country where this kind of conversation is what preserves who we are.
Right. Everything that you said about IVF and I guess the financial stake that certain folks have in that, it also ties very closely as you were talking about it. I mean, we could have plugged and played COVID vaccines in there, and I think that it would have been a very similar monologue because that's something that I know RFK Jr. is very passionate about. I happen to be very passionate about. I want to get into that censorship topic. I know you also come from a tech kind of background. You're very heavily involved in that space as well.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, when you're seeing all the censorship that we know happened to your running mate, that's happened to me personally, not only did the White House and the Biden administration want to shut RFK Jr. up, they wanted to shut me up too for simply saying that I wasn't going to get the vaccine. The White House digital director said, hey, Facebook, let's kind of minimize, let's monkey with the algorithm to keep voices like your running mate and me and Tucker Carlson and many others. Let's keep them a little more under the radar. I know that's been a big passion project for your running mate to talk about, but also in some sense you. And this is a big conversation. A lot of people want to forget that COVID ever happened, but I think we can't because it was government overreach to a level I've never seen in my lifetime. Yep. And I'm wondering, with your ties to the tech world and what tech did and the collusion there, what's your thought on that? And how far do you think this needs to go to be rectified?
I agree that we can't just ignore and sweep under the carpet what happened to this country and how those lockdowns and mandates impacted people's lives and how the safety of that vaccine was not vetted, resulting in excessive deaths. And beyond the excessive deaths, excessive injuries as well. So and it touches upon so many topics that you just mentioned. First Amendment rights. It touches upon the fact that our communities were gouged, so the economy was gouged. Expert opinions were definitely aligned with the pharmaceutical companies. They weren't aligned with the best interest of the communities.
Right.
So this cannot happen again, which is why we have to keep bringing it up. We have to keep talking about it. We have to keep putting it in the forefront. RFK's been, he was uniquely situated for this moment because that's how he has spent the last 3 decades of his career, is standing up to these big corporations and pharmaceutical companies that are hurting people. And that's why corporate capture is such a big part of his platform. Let's talk about tech and censorship. I've been living in the heart of Silicon Valley, affiliated with Stanford. I've been an entrepreneur. I've been an academic as well, and I've been very close to the tech leaders of Silicon Valley. And I will say that big tech has fallen under the same levels of corruption that big pharma have. And there's no excuse for it. I've worked really hard to try to come to terms with what's happened to Silicon Valley. And
what do you think did happen? Because it seems to me that the 2016 election was a big turning point in where the censorship started and where, I guess, people call it Trump derangement syndrome. I call it Trump derangement syndrome, but it seemed like a really coordinated effort after the Trump victory in 2016. That's when it seemed like not just big tech, but a lot of companies, they flipped and they decided that they were going to be activists rather than doing their job. And it really does feel like activism when we talk about big tech, because it only really seems to go one way. We don't see a lot of liberal thoughts being censored or being silenced or being quieted, but we see Donald Trump being kicked off social media. We see RFK Jr. being censored and silenced. I can't really name anybody on the other side that's had to experience that.
The platforms have really played a role in this, and I do think that they have infringed upon our First Amendment freedoms in serious ways. I tend to think of it, having seen it as like a slow boil, almost like the frog in the pot of water, just heating up little by little by little. And I will say that I don't think it was from a place initially of malice. The continuation of it now and the continual denial of it now is malice, because there's plenty of evidence to support that those were all mistakes. I'm waiting for that owning up. It is required for us to move forward as a country right now. It is required for us to heal. It is required for us to rebuild trust again in these platforms. They have lost so much trust and credibility. It's they're watching this. They know. It is a huge topic in the boardrooms. they're losing this argument because people in this country love the Constitution on the right and on the left. You know, I went to law school. Constitutional law is a really big deal.
Right.
It's something that we all want to preserve, and we can't do it in this environment. So these tech companies that continue this censorship, there's no winning for them in this moment. There's too much evidence to the contrary.
If they ever have to answer for it. I know you have limited time, but there is one thing that I wanted to ask you about, because when you were first announced as the running mate, there was a lot, of course, hit pieces on you. You knew that was going to happen. But one of the big things for a lot of conservatives that liked RFK Jr. were like, hey, you know, we like this guy. A lot of people, when he chose you, they were like, oh my gosh, she supports George Gascon in LA. She supports soft on crime policies. She's funding soft on crime, activist DAs. That was one of the major things that a lot of people were concerned about when your name was brought up. So I want to talk to you about that. And I want to get the real story from your mouth, what you actually stand for. And let's cut through the BS of some of the headlines, because I think that's always important to do.
Yeah, let's do it. So George Gascon, do you know what his career was before he became a DA?
I don't.
He was a police chief. He was a loved police chief. And he had done such a great job. And he wanted to help build relationships between DAs and the police department, because he understood what it's like to be a police officer. Putting your life in the line of fire every day. It's one of the greatest service positions we have in our country. I met him when he was the San Francisco district attorney, and you know, he had put himself through law school after being a police chief because he so badly wanted to bridge this. I had met him. I had worked with his chief of staff, and we were trying to figure out a way to make the prosecutor's office more efficient, more fair, and hold some standard to make sure that, you know, police felt safe and supported, the good police officers were being supported, that their cases and police reports were the ones that were going to get, you know, the right attention, but also being open to identifying, well, police officers, some of them might have some biases. There's just a reality there. And it was discovered that there were a few police officers at the time with certain biases, and that they were responsible for thousands and thousands of arrests, many of these people still incarcerated. I'm coming at this and looking at it as a as you know, holistic as I can. If there are people sitting in our prison systems that didn't commit violent offenses, and it's costing $75,000 upwards to $100,000 of taxpayer money to keep them there per year, and that, you know, some of these individuals may be very, very, very likely to be able to come out and live full and successful lives, we should be making every effort to fix this system.
Do you think that somewhere it went wrong, though? Because what you're saying is something, I mean, it's almost kind of Kim Kardashian's platform, Jessica Jackson, who I've had on my show and who's a friend of mine, advocating for criminal justice reform. I mean, you've got Donald Trump with the First Step Act. This isn't foreign to conservative thought. Yeah. But I think when you look at LA and you look at San Francisco and you look at New York City and you look at Washington, D.C., there's a lot of people sitting back saying these activist DAs, they're not trying to get people out that you're talking about that have low-level offenses that are behind bars.
I've recalled some of those. So Chesa Bowden, who came in right after George Gascon left San Francisco, is one of these DAs. I saw it, I spotted it immediately, and I said, no, you're not going to take the work we did here and turn it into that, and turn it into this hyperbole, you know, movement that is anarchist and that doesn't look at things holistically. I funded his recall, and he was successfully removed.
Yep.
So this is the
does
balance.
George Gascon deserve the same treatment in LA? Because there's been numerous attempts to recall. it hasn't gotten across the finish line. But a lot of people are very angry with him and very angry with the state of Los Angeles right now. Do
Yep.
you think that maybe he needs to be next?
Let's talk about the crime rate. I work with a ton of individuals in low income communities. You have to remember these communities get impacted by crime way harder than the middle class and upper class communities in LA. I'm there's very connected to these communities. And they all tell me the same thing. The crime spike in 2021 and 2022 coincided with the lockdown and Biden opening the borders with his 94 executive orders. LA's is the biggest city closest to our southern border.
Right.
LA got flooded. It got gutted, completely gutted during the lockdown. How could you do that to this community? You had migrants coming into communities whose almost 100% of individuals living in those communities are wage workers. These kids, many of these kids, their only hot meal a day is at school. So you take them out of school, you put them in a home that is already destabilized. You will have the biggest spike in crime ever in history. George Gascon's record, let's talk about his record in LA. I'm still looking at it. I'm going through it. I'm reassessing.
Okay.
There is only so much a DA can do to manage the crime rate itself, right? The George Gascon that I worked with in San Francisco always put violent offenders behind bars. He would work with the police department very closely to understand how the police department was in a moment of crisis. I mean, the police department in LA is in a moment of crisis. It's getting better. If you look at recent stats, as people have gone back to work, these communities have income coming in. You know, Aristotle said the father of all crime is poverty. As that gets better, the crime rates have been going down. And I swear to you, the minute that we secure our border again and we make it very clear that this is not how you immigrate into these cities, the crime rate will go down further too.
But how can you do that when you've got a state that's a sanctuary state? You've got Gavin Newsom that's committed to it being a sanctuary state.
I disagree with all of those things. I don't think that we should be a party to we should not be an ally. States should not be an ally to failed border policies.
Right. And I would agree with that wholeheartedly. But in terms, and I know we have to wrap it up, you're a very busy lady, you got a lot to do. But I do have to ask you about the cashless bail. That's something that's been having a disastrous impact on Illinois that decided to adopt it statewide. Of course, on New York City. California is experiencing the ramifications of that. And when you talk about officers who arrest somebody and then turn around and that person's already out on the street, it makes their job feel like it's not impactful. They don't feel like they're actually able to do their job. And some of these people, I understand the premise of it, but in reality, it doesn't seem to be working. But I don't see a lot of these DAs, activists, Democrats, I don't see them reversing course on these policies. Do you think we need to throw those in the garbage can, or do you think that they're working out?
I think the reason why progressives have looked at the bail system as being a place of incredible injustice is because if you have the money, you can get out, and if you don't have the money, you can't. So this becomes an issue of our justice system just treats people of poverty different. And, you know, I've met with these people that have been stuck cyclically in the system. They don't want to be in the system anymore. And the police officers don't want to keep having to put them in the system. And so, you know, cashless bail is easy to point at as being a contributor to this factor. But I think we can all agree that the biggest contributor is the fact that these are individuals who need to be rehabilitated and brought back into society so that they're not continuing to offend. If they are violent offenders, that doesn't even qualify for bail in most cases. So let's really look at what these offenses are all about. And we have to respect the laws in this country, that you're innocent until proven guilty, which is what the whole bail system is built upon.
What about the people that are reoffending? I mean, they're going out in New York City, they're punching somebody in the face, they're getting out, they're punching somebody in the face, they're getting out, they're punching somebody in the face. You mentioned the illegal immigrants in this country.
Yep.
ICE in Boston just had to arrest a Colombian national who was convicted of murder in his home country. He was apprehended by Border Patrol. He was released into this country, but it's not just the illegal immigrants, it's Americans. And then you've got the smash and grabs. LA has been really impacted by the smash and grabs.
Yeah.
So a lot of people look at this and they go, hey, listen, we want a fair and just system. We don't want the people who are on the poor side of the spectrum to be treated unfairly. But they also say, hey, listen, what about us decent folks who are hemorrhaging tax dollars and we're watching these people get in, get out, get in, get out, get in, get out. And some people are saying, hey, listen, maybe these people kind of need to stay behind bars for a while.
Yeah, I think for violent offenses, absolutely, there should be a penalty. There should be time served. I think for issues of petty theft and crime, it's really a matter of trying to figure out who in the community is going to figure out how to placate this. If we start, filling up our prison systems again with petty theft offenders, it's going to cost us a lot of money in this country. And it's not necessarily going to solve the issues that push people into this life of crime. So there's a number of ways I think we address this. Recidivism, looking at recidivism within the context of really those key motivating factors, and addressing them through the communities. If you talk to some of these community leaders, all of them are women and mothers who don't want to see their boys doing this. Mm-hmm. And this is how these are Americans. We have to remember these people are Americans, mm-hmm. and they deserve a chance to heal their communities. And we need to fight super hard to figure out who in those communities are going to be the best situated to prevent more young men and women to go into these lives of crime.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also put forth that maybe consequences might be a deterrent. And when you remove a lot of the consequences, I mean, when you've got people saying, hey, listen, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be out in a few hours, mm-hmm. that's a little concerning when they look at places like California and New York and they're openly saying, like, hey, listen, I can do this and I'm not really going to face the consequences. That's hard for Americans to hear.
It's really hard. And certainly there's community service kinds of things. I mean, there's so many things that we could do versus just swinging too far left on this. I agree, it has swung really far left. But I will say that when you have, 7 to 10 million immigrants coming into these communities, the people who feel most upset and most disenfranchised are the Americans living in those communities. Mm-hmm. So I would say that one of the biggest contributors of these Americans feeling like America has left them behind is the fact that America has left them behind.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you on that. So, the last thing I would ask you then, from a campaign platform perspective, mm-hmm. Donald Trump has said if reelected, he will begin the greatest mass deportation effort this country has ever seen. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you and RFK Jr., if elected, is that something that you would do as well?
This is a great example of the kind of conversation that needs to be happening today. It's not so simple as, let's militarize deportation. And it's not as simple as let's, put everyone in housing who came in illegally and reward that. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. And it's going to have to be done in the way America works when it works at its best, which is identify the issue, diagnose it, work humanely across teams, try not to have an extremist mentality around it that's going to scare people, and be fair. And I think that we can accomplish the best of the left and the right on this, which is, it's actually very normal for countries to deport individuals that have overstayed visas. This is normal.
Yeah.
So for individuals that have, arrived here, waiting for court dates, it would be natural to say, please wait for your court date outside of our borders, and you're welcome in for your court date, when it's time. And of course, our responsibility as a government in this moment is to make sure that our infrastructure is there, that still allows for legal immigration to occur. We haven't increased work visas in this country in decades.
Well, we really can't, because we've got 15 million that have come in the last 3.5 years. So it's hard to say we need more legal immigration when we have so much illegal immigration. I mean, we're getting full. Our resources only go so far.
And there's no excuse for that being our policy.
Yeah.
That is a failure of governance. That is a failure of running our institutions. That is a decay in our infrastructure, and it's blatant and it's in our face. And you can't say that this is going to be our excuse for not doing the job we were supposed to do up front. So we do have some structuring that needs to happen right now, and we're going to do it best, and we're going to do it from a place where we all feel proud if we do it from a place in the middle. And so we've got to normalize what that looks like again.
Well, I don't disagree with that. I think that the first step would be to secure the border.
Yeah.
But we can agree on that. And I think
100%.
that that's an important perspective. And who would have thought that somebody from Silicon Valley sitting here with me, who is obviously a conservative Trump supporter, would find areas of agreement? But that's why these conversations need to happen. And I know that you're talking about this on a daily basis. You're very open. You're very accessible. Where can my audience go to hear more from you and to hear more of your take and your narrative on a lot of the things being talked about?
Yeah, so I'm very active on X. X is my direct communication with the people in the press. I launched a podcast as well called Back to the People. We've just released our 3rd episode. This one is with an economist, Luke Grauman, on how to fix our national debt issue and how we got here. And then I'm out there, I'm out there on podcasts every day. I had the pleasure of meeting Danica Patrick. So that one will be coming out soon. Riley Gaines, I was on her podcast. And I really think that this is going to be the podcast presidency. And how lucky are we? How lucky are we that we get to have long form conversation?
Well, and I also give you a ton of credit, like I said at the start, for being willing to do it, because there are a lot that are not. A lot, especially more on the left liberal side, who are not willing to have conversations. Even, people that are independent, libertarian, don't want to have conversations on the conservative side. So I give you a lot of credit for that, because you're accessible, and that's not something that everybody can say.
Thank you. Well, thank you for
so
having
much
me.
for being here. We hope you enjoy Nashville. We hope you enjoy Tennessee.
It's amazing.
And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right. Please be sure to go visit our new Tomi Lahren is Fearless YouTube channel and like and subscribe for full episodes, including this one. And I will see you right back here live at 1 p.m. Eastern tomorrow for a very special episode, kind of linked to what we were talking about, all about COVID censorship and government infringement. But until then, from Nashville, God bless. Take care.